Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the Spurs Pursuit. I'm your host Martin Frank, and today a lovely guest joins me in Chris himself, who has so much experience in the background of professional refereeing. Chris, welcome to the channel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I seem to have been quite red. So unbelievably in England, it's been quite sunny this week. So I think I've caught the sun a little bit. And also, I think my camera settings might be slightly wrong, but look, we'll live with it. It's not that bad, but I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great myself. The red looks good on your face, so that you can take that as a compliment. So, Chris, how was your Easter? Did you enjoy not having time to watch Tottenham? Because if you guys don't know, Chris is also a big Tottenham fan.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I'm preparing for the drive to Sunderland this weekend, so it's a 4.5 hours for me, so that's going to be quite a journey. But Easter was good, didn't do a lot. I'm on a break at the moment between work contracts, so just chilling, doing not a lot. I've got 2 dogs, so going to lots of dog shows and things like that. So it was nice. And the weather, as you can see, was quite warm. So it's been very good, mate, very good.
So you've been very, very busy. Now, this video is slightly different to every video that I do, which is literally just filled with Tottenham Hotspur, reviewing Tottenham, previewing Tottenham and so on. So I've invited Chris because there is no one I would love to speak to more about the professional refereeing in either the PGMOL or also the UEFA, the FIFA. Like Chris has already mentioned in the backstage, the FIFA official list of referees has been submitted and published yesterday or today, was it, Chris?
Yeah, yesterday for the World Cup, yeah.
For the World Cup, perfect. So we'll get a little bit into that. But before we do so, Chris, run the fans, the people watching, a little bit about yourself and your background in this industry.
Yeah, okay. So I never had any interest particularly in refereeing, to be honest. So as a kid, I just wanted to play football. I wasn't very good. But when I went to university, so we're now talking, it's many years ago, we're talking around 2000-ish. I went to university. My dad was a referee, so he was always banging on to me. You should do the referee's course. You should do the referee's course. And I was always like, oh, yeah, shut up about refereeing. I'm not interested. But I got injured when I went to play for the university. When I first went for the trials, like massive trials, everybody come down. So I actually got picked as a very bad centre-back. I fooled them into thinking I was half decent because I just shouted at everybody else like I was rubbish. But I was just like, yeah, move here, move there. You pick that man up. Didn't know what I was doing, but I got picked to come back for the proper trials. I got injured right at the end of the session. The proper trials were the next day, and I got up in the morning. I couldn't walk, so I didn't go, which actually was a massive mistake. I should have just gone to make those kind of bonds and friends and that kind of thing. I didn't. So while I was injured, I was out for a while. There was a free university course on, so I went, took that for refereeing. Went and did that. Started just to do a bit of refereeing. All the friendship circles in football were formed. I felt like an outsider, so I started just to do the refereeing and never looked back from there, really. So some people take to it, some don't. I enjoyed it. I started then to just do as much as I can off the pitch as well. So like mentoring other people who just started, I'd go and watch them and try and help them. I got into instructing, so I qualified as someone who can teach people how to referee. So I was doing all of that kind of in my spare time as well as refereeing as a hobby. So much so that the Football Association then created these job roles called referee development officers for every county in the UK. And I applied for one of those roles and I got one of those roles. So I became a full-time referee development officer, doing everything I was already doing as well as a full-time job. But now I was just getting paid to do it, which was quite nice. So I did that for 5 years, which is coaching everybody from young teenagers when they first want to learn how to qualify, taking those courses, through to coaching people who are more advanced referees trying to get into kind of semi-pro football. And at that stage in England, the Football Association take over and sort of take responsibility for them. So trying to get people through to that stage. And yeah, so I did that for 5 years, obviously refereeing myself as well, kind of at a mediocre level at best. And yeah, that's it really. I then left and moved into the world of betting and gambling, which is maybe that's a different pod entirely. We can do all of that as well. But yeah, that's kind of my background really.
Perfect. And did that change your relationship with football? Because, you mentioned before that you was only a player, but your dad was a referee. So maybe there was some influence already coming in from his perspective. But did that change your relationship with football, the way you saw it?
Once you've refereed football, you can't watch football the same ever again. I think it does, I would say, ruin the way you watch football. It certainly changes it. So, and you can see that at the Tottenham Stadium, where I'm a season ticket holder. So I'll sit there and I spot things quicker in terms of refereeing than normal football, which is completely natural, right?
Yeah.
So just for example, when a long ball's played forward, I naturally, my eyes go to the assistant because that's what I've always done as a referee. The ball goes over there, but I'm going to look over here. You've got to. And that's the way I watch football. So very common when a goal's disallowed for offside, like everybody's up cheering and I'm just sat down because I've already seen the flag go up, and it just changes. Also, the other thing it does, you do understand the game better. It's funny, really. I mean, maybe this will develop into this conversation. One of the classic criticisms is refs don't understand the game, but it comes from people who haven't refereed, who understand the game less than someone like me who's watching it. And I can explain usually to people around me, this has been given for that reason or that reason, because I can read what's happening. I know what it's like. I understand the referee's body language, how they're communicating with each other. So it's great to understand the game more, but it does ruin it slightly as a fan, maybe.
Yeah. And when you are in the stands, you know, as a season ticket holder, we all know the stereotype with the referees by the fans that, you know, the referees are clueless and the fans have this sort of arrogant stance against them. Is it difficult to even speak to certain fans around you when you are trying to explain them a decision that you are not only more qualified in, but more, you know, more intelligent in?
Yeah. It's funny. I was just laughing because I'm thinking of poor people who sit around me, to be honest. I try not to react to everything, but sometimes there's a level of nonsense that fans put forward that I have to... I try and do it politely. I'm not going to get in an argument. But where they completely misunderstand something, I will say that's not what's happened. Or they go, oh yeah, you've got to send him off for that. I'm like, you can't send him off for that. Like, there's not anything in law that allows you to do that. So I do feel a bit sorry for the people who sit around me because I get involved in it. But one thing you just said, I think actually is such a great way of putting it. To call it arrogance would be a bit harsh, that people are arrogant that they know, but people who've watched football for years, they always think that they know how to referee a game of football. I understand why they think that, because you watch it week in, week out. But if you've not been out there and done it, because the general mindset I would suggest is that fans think it's straightforward and it's easy, and it's just the laws aren't mostly that difficult to understand. So just go out there and do it. It's just not that simple. I guess the analogy I might draw is like saying, I don't know if you drive, Martin, but most of us probably drive. Does that mean that you know better than Max Verstappen how to drive a Formula One car? Yeah, but I drive, and I watch you drive. All you're doing is turning a corner. How difficult could it be? Probably very, very difficult, I would imagine. That's why they're the only few people that do it. And it's the same sort of thing. It looks straightforward, but there's a lot more. It's a tough gig. It's a tough gig to be a referee, for sure.
Yeah, perfectly put, Chris. Thank you. And now let me ask you a question about, a lot of people see referees as people who, you know, let's say not in a very positive light, and they see refereeing as a job that is absolutely horrific. You know, like, why would someone want to become a referee? So tell us, what is maybe positive about being a referee, especially at the top level?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the bottom level, if you don't mind, because I had a passion for it. And obviously I used to teach a lot of teenagers how to become a ref and try and support them. And that's very, very difficult to support them at a low level. As one person in a county, I can't be everywhere watching everybody referee. I can only be in one place. And it's tough. So as a 14-year-old, they're probably going out, maybe starting on the under 11s or something. But it's tough for them. So the parents who are around are very difficult. I'd be interested, even maybe me and you can have a chat about this off the pod, but what it's like in other countries, because in the UK, it is horrendous, the attitude towards referees, even at a youth level. So there's no safe space for a kid to learn. So even at the under 11s, a 14-year-old turns up and they expect him to be like Howard Webb. And like, well, this kid's going to make mistakes. Like, how's he supposed to learn? But one thing I used to think it did, and what was unbelievable for teenagers who stuck with it, some hated it from the beginning because people, they're criticising you. It's tough being a teenager at the best of times, but to have that, people going, no, you're wrong, that is really character forming. So I would genuinely see people transform as individuals, especially the youngsters as they're growing up, because they've got responsibility, they've got accountability, they've got to behave in certain professional ways, which they've probably never had before. So to see people grow as individuals is an amazing thing. And I'd massively advocate, providing they've got the right support around them, any youngster who loves football to go into it, because I think it can help in ways, develop you as an individual in ways like almost nothing else I can think of can do it, just because it does test you. It's really tough. When you get to the top level, benefits are completely different. These guys are getting lots of money, lots of support, lots of all their kit for free. Like, it's expensive to do the referee course and get your kit, and no one helps you at the beginning. By the top of it, yeah, they're getting everything for free. Oh, obviously, it's tough as well. They get assessments. Everything they do is monitored. But yeah, there's great rewards to be had. And let's be honest, it's more realistic that if you're a good referee, you can probably get to a very high level easier than you can if you're a player. But just a numbers game, right? There are tens of hundreds of thousands, millions of people playing football. There's not millions of people refereeing. So if you're good, you can get to the top level. And I suppose the last thing I'd say as well is a lot of fans think that referees somehow have been dragged from some deep, dark corner, don't understand football, like hate football. There's some sort of referee school somewhere of people who just hate football and they're going to go and make them ruin matches. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every referee I know love football more than you can possibly imagine, which is why they're refereeing, because they know they're not very good players, but they're so desperate to be involved. And that's what it does. It keeps you involved and it gives you an exposure. And it did for me. I can talk a bit in later on about my experiences. I got to do things partly because of my job, not my ability, that I never would have got to do as a player. The people I refereed were, and that's just amazing. Like I mentioned it to you before, like I used to go down to Tottenham's training ground and referee matches with Jermaine Defoe and people like that. It's just, I never would have got that chance as a player. So those sort of things. I refereed at Wembley, like I could talk about it so passionately because they're just amazing. Like there are times I used to just look around and go, what am I doing here? Like there's Peter Crouch and Harry Redknapp. And so the opportunities potentially are unbelievable.
And this is fantastic to know because I think, if we are able to just inspire one person watching this video to see the actual perks of it, because there is this misconception with it that it's so negative. And, I myself played football at a semi-professional level and, I always saw referees as being my enemy in a sense. And yes. I mentioned to you, Chris, backstage that I had the privilege of actually lecturing, being a private English lecturer for a professional UEFA referee from Slovakia called Peter Ziemba, who actually refereed in the Europa League, the Conference League, the Under-21 Champions League and Euros. And he changed completely my perspective on it. I still remain quite critical of PGMOL. We will get into that. But it completely changed my view of the actual refereeing itself. And, since then, I've actually got a little bit more involved in refereeing and have refereed a game myself. In it was a tournament. It wasn't an 11-a-side game. It was just a 5-a-side game between children who were under 12s. And, it's a completely different dynamic being the referee. So, although it does bring a lot of negatives, which we will touch upon in a second, it brings a lot of positive perks and attributes to it as well, where you can grow as a person. And it's a fantastic thing that you say. And one thing I wanted to touch upon before we move on, Chris, is the dressing room dynamic. So not always, but usually, especially in UEFA competitions, referees usually form a team, let's say. It's usually the same referee with his linesman, right? How important is it to have a good connection and good communication between the referee and the linesman and the VAR? How important is that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at a lower level, that doesn't happen. So At the very lowest level, you don't even have a team, right? So on a Sunday morning, you're going out, you're on your own. So that's tough. As you begin to work up a little bit, you will then have a team of three. You wouldn't have a fourth official, but it would be different every week. But even so, the communication, I think it's probably harder at a lower level. I don't think fans really appreciate how much communication goes on between referees. So back at when I was doing it and the kind of rubbish level I got to, I didn't have all these amazing mod cons that the top guys have today. So I was out there basically with two flags and relying on looking at each other. So the amount of subtle signals, and you would work on this a lot. You have your pre-match instructions as a referee to your assistants, what I want you to do in this scenario, what I don't want you to do. And it's so important to understand that dynamic. Just little things like, again, fans just think your assistant is just there making decisions in like isolation, and the referee's making decisions in isolation from the assistant. It's not like that at all. Like the ball's going out. At the top level, they're talking to each other, but even at the bottom level, there's eye contact, and we're going, right, subtle ways in which you hold the flag as an assistant to say, I think the throw-in should go this way, because as a referee and assistant, the worst thing you want to avoid is the referee saying, right, I'm going to give it that way at the exact same moment the assistant flags the other way. That is a problem because it's divisive. They see that you're not working well together, and it just erodes your match control. So you have to work on how you're going to communicate, and even players mostly, but certainly fans don't recognise any of that. Obviously, when you get to the top level now, it's a little bit easier. It does make me laugh as well sometimes, though. I don't know how fans sometimes can be so ignorant, but they say things like, oh, he's not even talked to his assistant. Of course he's not. He's got a headset. Like they're just talking to each other. What do you want him to do? Go over every single time? There are times when I think you should go over, even though you've got a headset, but that's a different thing. So at the top level, of course, these guys are in teams of three a lot, as you rightly say. And hopefully, it's like anything. Like a football team, you want ideally to be more than the sum of its parts. And it's the same with a set of officials. If they can work together in a positive way and they enjoy each other's company, then they can hopefully be better than just three individuals. You cannot work in isolation. You can't have your referee and your two assistants just making decisions in a bubble without being aware of what else is going on. They'd never get to the top level if that was the case. It just wouldn't happen. So, but yeah, just to summarise that sort of section, what I would say is that fans just don't appreciate massively the amount of communication that goes on. And the one thing that maybe is just slightly started to change a little bit is that Sky now are publicising in England, you see occasionally on Twitter and that, the ref cam.
Yeah.
So they're publicising these little sort of montages of a game where you can actually hear the referee talk to the players, because the communication with the players as well is so important. People think the ref's out there just not saying anything, giving decisions. Nothing like that at all. The referee... I used to lose my voice. That was one problem I massively had in football. For whatever reason, my vocal cords aren't very strong, and you're trying to communicate over long distances. Like 20, 25 minutes into every match, my voice used to go squeaky because I didn't have the strong vocal cords. It was a bit embarrassing. But that's because you're trying to communicate all the time. Communication is the most important thing in refereeing. Absolutely, by a long way.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. And not just in refereeing, I think in a lot of different industries, it's the most essential bit, even in relationships, is communication. So I think you summed it up perfectly there, Chris. And that does bring me to the second point, which you've already touched upon, is obviously the negative side of being a referee, and that's mainly the abuse that they get. So from the experience that my referee had, that I was lecturing him, he had the privilege of being in, top clubs in Turkey, top clubs in the, Serbia, Croatia, being in England, being in Ireland as well. And these countries I mentioned specifically are the most hostile towards referees. They make it so much more difficult for referees to referee a game because, it does influence you. It really does when you are just... You make a decision and you hear the roar of the, let's say, 50,000 that are absolutely going at you. He mentioned that countries like Germany were much better, that there was a respect towards the referee that, not always, but he mentioned that it is incomparable, like a Germany and Turkey. And, we're seeing it in England, like you've already mentioned. Sky are trying to implement this, mic'd up, that we're getting more transparency with the referees. So with that being done, I think it's bridging the gap between the fans, which is fantastic. What else, Chris, would you think would be fantastic to bridge the gap between the fans and the referees?
Yeah, one thing I think that PGMO in England could do more of, and probably this is true for most countries, I guess. I don't think they do enough. So the mic'd up is where Howard Webb, who's our head of refereeing, goes on and explains some of the controversial decisions, and you can hear the audio from the VAR. I think it's great. Fans want to criticise it no matter what he said. You can't win. It doesn't really matter. But if you put your club bias aside and just listen, I think you'll appreciate that the referees are trying to do a good job. And yeah, of course, they make mistakes. The two big things I think that would help is one's within the control of the PGMO, which is just to do more education for fans. So I don't feel there's anything out there where they make any real effort to explain. Like, what are the things that cause the most controversy? Possibly the offside law, maybe handball. Why can't they just do a program that not everybody's going to watch, but just go, look, we're going to give you we'll do a program on handball. Why is it difficult? Why are there inconsistencies? Let's look at some, but there's nothing like that. There's no education just generally on the laws for fans, because fans always criticise officials. I'd say the vast majority of the time, the fans don't know the law. They don't understand it. And so a lot of their criticism is misplaced because they just don't. Their fans generally want decisions based on what they think the law should be, not what the law actually is. So that's one thing, just general more education. The other thing is not within the PGMO's gift, because it would need a law change from IFAB, who control the laws of the game, which would be to open up the audio. I see no reason whatsoever why that VAR conversation should not be made public at the time it's happening. I've got no with it, and even the audio in the match. But there is a little bit of history I'll touch on very quickly there. I genuinely believe that the reason primarily why they don't want the audio of the match officials released is nothing to do with the referees. I genuinely believe it's because the image of the game would be tarnished by hearing what the players say and how the players behave towards the officials. That would have to change, which is why I think it's a positive. It's like, let's not do it because their behaviour is bad, but if you do it, their behaviour will change. So I'd be a big advocate for doing it, because I think referees, in my opinion, we've got nothing to hide. The only slight concern is that the moment the referee chooses his words slightly suboptimally, everybody will jump on it. So I'll give you one example. And you probably know this from when you were talking about you refereeing. The first time you go and do it, you probably realise, I'd say for anybody, it's an eye-opener when you're the guy with the whistle, that you suddenly realise how infrequently you're actually really certain about what's happened. Like the simple things happen and you're like, actually, I'm not quite sure. And that's what refereeing is. It's not 100%. You're not always 100% certain. Some of it you're 80% certain, but you've got to give it with absolute super confidence. And that's difficult for an official, right? So I think that's probably one of the things maybe you found when you were refereeing, that it's not quite as easy as it looks, right? But things I'd change. Just open it up. I don't think referees have got anything to hide. But the second they say, I'm not sure,
that's
fans are right. But you've got to give something. It's a throw into one team and they've both hit it at the same time. You've got to give it one way. So, and it might be 50-50. And this is where someone like me would come in, right? I'd coach the referees to say, you've got to internalize that doubt. So every referee is the same. And you've got to you're thinking, I've got no idea. But you can't show that physically. So you've got to think, right, I'm going to give it to the Reds. And then when you give it, you've got to give it like it's the most obvious decision you've ever given in your life. So you've got to be confidence, body language, verbalize it, right? It's a red throw. You might have no clue, but you can't show it, right? That's some of the skill, but that would work. That's the only thing that worries me, is that there's no empathy for the difficulty of refereeing. So the second anyone says anything slightly wrong, or they're not 100% sure of something, there'd be an issue from fans generally. But open it up, I'd be a big fan of it.
Exactly, and you beat me to it, Chris. You genuinely beat me to it, and you mentioned the players. And the players have no respect towards the referees, and sometimes understandably, because there are certain decisions that are made on the field that you are, as a fan, confused, and you understand the players' frustration. But at the same time, it's the abuse that the referees are getting from the players. There's nothing being done about it. There really isn't. Okay, we had Romero punished for it. That was Romero punished for it against Liverpool. How many players have abused the referees and nothing has been done? Managers the same.
Yeah.
And, fourth officials, the referee that I coached, he was also a fourth official very often. And he mentioned, 90 minutes he's just getting abused on the touchline and he's not even making the decisions, So, are the players actually being lectured? I'm guessing they are, aren't they? In the background.
Yeah. Well, clubs will do anything to get the smallest advantage, and if they feel intimidating the referee is part of that will be a strategy. To some extent, I've got a little bit of sympathy. Is that the right word? I'll defend players a little bit. I don't mind it really on the pitch during the game because they're there to win. So I don't actually mind it. Where for me it becomes a real problem, I suppose, one on the pitch, one off the pitch. I think there are times where it steps over a line and referees at the top level need to send a message out that things are not acceptable, and sometimes they fail to do that. And I think possibly a recent example of that might have been where Gabriel Martinelli pushed Sam Barrett the other day.
Yeah, in the FA Cup.
That, I understand why Sam Barrett showed him a yellow card, but just think how that filters down throughout the game and what now happens on the parks the next day where people think they can push the ref and that should just not be acceptable. And I feel in that moment, I understand why Sam Barrett cautioned him, but for the game, the better outcome would have been a red card, in my opinion, because it sends a clear message out that behaviour to officials is not acceptable. So that would be, but generally on the pitch, I've a bit of sympathy with players because they're just trying to win. The bigger issue for me actually is off the field. So I can forgive the players to a point because they're trying to serve a purpose, but it goes on after the game, after the game, the intimidation, the abuse, without getting into my refereeing. I was lucky and hopefully something to do with some level of ability that I never got myself into real difficulties because I'll be brutally honest, I'm a referee defender, but bad referees bring it on themselves at a low level because they don't understand man management and it can make it worse. So hopefully I had some ability that didn't happen to me too much. I never got assaulted. The worst I had, I did because I worked for the FA. I used to get sent to matches that were known to be problem games because they're like, well, he works for the FA. They might respect him a bit more. I don't know if that really worked. But the worst one, I remember walking off at half time, getting followed by a manager who was and I had two young assistants as well, walking off, and he was just behind me going, we know where you live, ref, we're going to come around, we're going to stab you, we're going to rape your wife. And I'm like, well, I'm not married, so you don't know me that well. But that kind of stuff was just like, wow, this is a game of football. That can be really intimidating. Again, going back to the character forming, you can see why, this is a local level game, really. You can see why a lot of people leave refereeing because what other line of work or hobby does anybody have where that kind of thing is par for the course? But there you go.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic example that you give. Even on the bigger stage, if you remember Anthony Taylor after the Europa League final with AS Roma, and he was with his family at the airport, and he was assaulted by, and not just him, his wife and his daughter were assaulted at the airport. So this is the negative it brings. And one thing you've also said, this will be the last thing about the referees before we move on to VAR, which is a massive talking point.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there will always be in every single game a decision where you're not 100% certain. Now, there will be certain decisions you make and you realise you've made the wrong decision. You've made a massive mistake that can potentially, cause a different outcome of the game, which is something you want to avoid as a referee. How do you bounce back from that mistake during the game?
So at the top level, they've got sports psychologists that will help with exactly this kind of thing. And I'll give you two parts to the answer. First of all, what I'm going to say. The first bit is you've got to forget it and move on, right? And that is difficult. And there's a lot of training goes on for the guys at the top level to be able to do that. Again, character forming, because ultimately, if you let that play in your mind, you're going to make more mistakes.
Yeah.
And you've got to give an honest decision. And if you give one that's wrong, and yes, sometimes you do realise in the game, I've got that wrong. But you've got to carry on giving honest decisions. And if you take the fact that you've influenced the game in a negative way because you've given a wrong decision, if you carry that with you into your next decision, you're not giving an honest decision anymore. You're giving one that's influenced by the fact that you've made a mistake. So that is tough. I genuinely believe most referees consciously do that and go, I can't, I'm not being fair to everybody if I now think, they shouldn't have had that goal, whatever. But the one thing, and the second part to the answer that I can't give you any kind of insight into because of its nature, is what is going on subconsciously in your mind. Well, it's subconscious, so I can't, but if you could prove it one way or another, I'm sure there must be some element. It's the same argument as walking out. Do big teams get bigger decisions? Like if you're refereeing at Old Trafford with 80,000, is that subconsciously on your mind and influencing you? I don't know. How do you prove it? Because it's subconscious, but to a point, I suppose it must, but I don't know how do you get around something that you can't consciously measure or know about. So all you can do is control your active thoughts and your conscious thoughts, and a lot goes into that with referees. I genuinely believe referees don't go out to fix their errors. They go out to make no errors in the first place. And if they get it wrong, as long as it's an honest mistake, you have to just accept it and move on, really, and just give your next best decision. We don't always get it right. The idea, though, that referees don't care about that is unbelievable to me. Like I used to, not so much now, but I used to, when I was working in football, know all the top guys and know how much they care. And if they get it wrong, how much it impacts them. And the public narrative of they don't care, they'll get a game next week, that could not be further from the truth.
Yeah. And I think that Chris gives some fantastic advice, not just in the football, in the refereeing industry, anywhere. If you're working somewhere, because we're dealing with things under pressure. Refereeing, you're working under pressure. If you're working for a big company under pressure, fantastic advice is just, forget about the mistake and just keep doing what you do best. And this is a great example to look at referees as well from a neutral perspective. If you're doing your job to the best of your abilities and you make a mistake, you haven't done it on purpose. You're human. So I think that's a great way to look at referees, is they're actual human beings and they're trying to do the best job possible. And now, Chris, moving on to the second part of this video is the VAR. And, you've seen my X account and we've had some different opinions on certain subjects, which is obviously completely natural. And I've been very critical of PGMOL and the way it's run with VAR. So, Chris, run me through a little bit of history of the way VAR was brought in and the role it plays now. Is it the same? Has it changed?
Yeah, well, it's useful. So that's a great starting point to start at the beginning, because I think now people have forgotten why it was brought in. Because there seems to be a narrative that, let's just go back to what it was. It used to be fine. It didn't used to be fine. That's why we got to where we are. Because referees are human beings, as you said. It looks easy, but let me just throw this bit out to you. There's no league in any country in the history of football where they've gone, oh yeah, the referees are great. Every single season, in every league, in every country, in every level of football, the referees are never good enough. So if that's true, maybe we're at the point where, I love the narrative that the referees have never been good enough, but the answer is they just need to be better. Maybe the answer is there's a limit of how good one human being can be when you're refereeing 22 players who are trying to cheat you, and at the top level who are super athletes and things happening so quickly, it's difficult because fans see things that look clear and the referee gets it wrong, and they can't compute how can you get that wrong. But we all do that as fans, unbeknown to them, are a bit disingenuous, I think, because the amount of times they sit watching a game and they go, oh, that's a free kick, and they might look at it later and go, oh no, it wasn't a free kick. They're getting it wrong all the time. But the referee gets it wrong once and they hold him to a level of accountability. Like, how's he got that? He's an idiot. Well, but we've all watched football. We've all gone, that's never a foul. And then we look at the replay and go, oh, yeah, maybe it was a foul. That's just human, the limits of human nature. And you watch things and your eyes deceive you sometimes. So if we reverse back to before VAR, certain things happened in the history of football that were egregious errors, like outrageous errors, going back to Maradona's handball against England in 1986. I'll go with another one against England. I was at this match in the 2010 World Cup where Frank Lampard's shot hit the bar and went over the line. I was there. That's a great example. Within 40 seconds, I'm sat in the stadium in Bloemfontein. I was pretty sure it was in right there and then, because the ball bounces back up towards the field of play and it comes up and hits the bar on the way out. And I'm like, well, how can it be traveling this direction, hit the bar, if it wasn't in? And within 40 seconds, my mate in England texts me, definitely a goal. The only people who didn't know were the officials. So, and there were lots of mistakes like that. Obviously, I know English football best, so there was a number in English football. There was a ghost goal at Watford. Things like that where they're so outrageous. An international one, the Thierry Henry handball against Ireland in the World Cup playoff, I think it was. Yep. That are so outrageous that, and football's got to the point now where there's so much money and things are so important that the game felt like it had to do something about it, right? So the first thing we got was goal line technology, which has worked really well. And then there was a push to VAR to fix the worst of errors. I think that's worked. I think people find that a controversial statement, but I would say generally, how often do you see someone punch the ball in and the goal stand? How often do you see someone dive and there's no contact at all, but the penalty stands? How often do you see someone thump somebody off the ball and them not be sent off? All of these things for me have gone from the game because VAR actually has fixed them. The problem now is that fans quickly forget that, and the push has been, the managers won't come out and ever go, oh yeah, well, it looks like that should have been a foul for us, but it's okay, like it's subjective, we get some, we don't, that never happens. It's always outrage, and it's always, that's disgraceful decision against us, it's not acceptable. We've seen Barcelona complaining about the referee from the handball incident, which I know you want to come on to. So now football pushes the narrative further and further. It doesn't come from referees. Referees never ask for VAR. Referees are kind of have to do what they're told by the people who make the laws of the game. So they have to work with it, but it's always been, we've seen for the World Cup now, they're going to start checking whether it's a corner before the corner's taken. And I'm like, where does this end? And that's where I do have a bit of a problem with it, because it's now got involved with decisions that are so subjective. It doesn't matter which way you give it. Half the people are going to tell you that you're an idiot and you're wrong. So how do you square that circle when you want everybody to agree? All we want is consistency. But whichever way you give it, half of the people are going to say you're inconsistent. So I'm like, well, how do you win? And that's my problem with VAR. I think it's got involved with way too much now, way too much. And we've gone from, it's a victim of its own success in the sense of, we're not saying, how's he let that goal, the Henry goal, how's that happened? How has someone dived and got a penalty? We're not having that discussion, but we are having, he's held his shirt. Is that how's he missed the pull? Was that a push? So I think that's a measure of its success, but it's now got to the point where everything is overanalyzed. It all takes too long, and I think something needs to be done about that.
That's a fantastic point you make, Chris. And you know, a lot of you guys watching it, there's not still many of you, but I'm grateful for every single one of you watching. Most of you guys are Spurs fans, and like Chris alluded to, that the key decisions, One of the biggest decisions we've had in our advantage is Manchester City against Tottenham Hotspur, UEFA Champions League quarterfinals, last minute. Aguero scores or Sterling scores, I'm not sure. And it was
Yeah,
given as
Sterling.
goal. And we would never have experienced the Ajax Amsterdam semi-final if VAR didn't exist, because the referee gave an on-goal decision, but it was later turned. You know what I'm alluding to, Chris? The last-minute offside.
I remember it well. Aguero was offside and then Sterling scored. Yeah.
Exactly. So what we're speaking about here with the Lampard incident, with this incident, we all try and say, and I'm not trying to defend VAR and push VAR that this is the best thing on the planet. I am more closer to football as a fan than I am to a referee. But what I am saying is we never complain about it when it's in our favour. We always complain. Exactly. We always complain about it when it's not in our favour. And I think with the global scale that football is, with the money that's involved, as Chris, you've mentioned, no matter how perfect or imperfect VAR will be or something else, there will always be something to criticise about, whether that's the referees, whether that's the players, whether that's the too many games being played, too little games being played. Now, coming on to my issue is, I say the transparency of certain decisions. Like you mentioned, it is subjective to give a decision like this, and it's I understand it's so difficult to bridge the gap of subjectivity in football as a referee, because the rule is stated in this way, and it's two people will interpret it in two different ways, and both are correct. And this is the
100%.
issue. So let's bring out two decisions that have happened recently in the Champions League. So the first one is what you've alluded to. FC Barcelona have submitted an official complaint against Istvan Kovac from the Tuesday Champions League game, where there is a handball with Musso, the goalkeeper, actually taking the goal kick, passing to Lenormand, who touches the ball, which is deemed as handball in the eyes of FC Barcelona. But in the defence of Atletico Madrid, they are saying that Lenormand was just, controlling it to then take the goal kick. Chris, as a referee or in a global scale to maybe help avoid such decisions and such controversy happening in the future, what's your take on this?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is this is where I think there's a massive lack of honest discourse around refereeing. So, because if that had have happened the other way around, Barcelona would be up in arms if that was given as a penalty against them. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah.
And the 1 minute you want referees, people say they want consistency and common sense, but they only want consistency and common sense when it's in their favour. If it's not in their favour, then they don't want it. So what I would say about that incident in particular, it's not the first time we've seen it. We've seen it a few times now. Certainly happened in an Arsenal-Bayern game a couple of years ago,
yes.
and it wasn't given. And I remember a couple of examples in Europe, maybe in Germany, where it was given. I think before I say what I think about that incident, I think you make a very good point, by the way, that there's a lot of incidents in football that people can't get their head around what I'm about to say, which is, I met a mate of mine last night who used to be a referee, and he was showing me a couple of incidents, said, what do you think of these? And I watched them, and I said, I think you can justify either outcome. So some of them were penalty incidents, and I said, I think you can justify giving a penalty, and I think you can justify not giving a penalty. And I think for the most fans, that would blow their mind because every fan seems to think that everything that happens on a football pitch has a binary outcome. It's either has to be this or it has to be that. That is just not the case. It's down to interpretation about what is a foul, and I'll go back to the holding. Like, are we going to say that is a holding offence and worthy of a penalty? But it's not. It's a holding offence. You hold someone's shirt, there's no impact whatsoever. So most people would say, well, I don't want a penalty given for that. But then if I do that and I'm like, well, everyone wants a penalty for that. So where in the middle does it become an offence? And that's going to be different for me as it is to you. That's a personal opinion. And that's the fundamental problem with refereeing. If you actually think about why does a referee exist? If you go back to the very beginnings of football, two teams playing each other needed a referee because they couldn't agree on a subjective decision. That was the whole reason. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a referee in the first place. So the idea that a referee can ever get consensus across the whole game of everybody, well, if that was true, you wouldn't need the ref in the first place. Anyway, very long answer. Back to the point of the Barcelona incident. For me, I mean, I've seen it. I'm not 100% convinced that the goalkeeper does definitely mean it as a restart. But nonetheless, the way I would coach my referees would be, there's certain mantras we have in refereeing, and one of them is no surprises. We don't want to be the guy, when the entire of football on the pitch, everybody expects one decision to be given. We don't want to be the guy that goes, no, we're going to give something else because this is what it says in the letters of the law. You kind of need to referee the game within the laws of the game's like a framework. You can't just ignore them, but within that you have to understand how the players want that game refereed. I'll give you, I know my answers are really long, but I'm going to give you another quick story. I remember when I went to Tottenham's training ground once to referee a reserve match many years ago, and Danny Rose, Jake Livermore, Ryan Mason, they were all playing. That was a level of football that was high for me. I'd not refereed games with that level of ability. The level I refereed at, any contact, they wanted free kicks. So first half, I referee what I'm used to refereeing. And at half time, walking off, Jake Livermore, as the Tottenham captain, comes up to me and says, ref, can you just do us a favour and can you stop giving as many free kicks? And I'm like, okay, that's weird to me. And I rang my coach at the time, it was a Football League ref, and said, what do I do? And he said, Chris, you've got to understand that at this level, they are different, they expect different things. The level you're at, they're not very good. They want any contact, they want a foul. Here, they will tell you if they want a foul because they expect contact, they don't want a free kick for it. If they think there's been offence, they will tell you, and you need to adapt your refereeing accordingly. So that was a lesson for me. So going back to the offence here, I mean, do we really want a massive match decided by something like that? There was no intent to deceive. There was no intent to gain any advantage whatsoever from it. It's just maybe at worst a miscommunication between the defender and the goalkeeper. The defender is acting with honesty to go, he genuinely thinks this hasn't been taken. He's the one going to be taking a goal kick. So for me, I don't think the game has an appetite for those sort of things to be given as penalties. So I'd absolutely support the referee to say that is a great example of where common sense should kick in and go, this doesn't feel like the right outcome for the game to be giving penalties for something like that. So, but of course, the second it's against your team, you're up in arms going, but the law says that. I'm like, okay, well, so what do you want? Because next week you're going to be going, yeah, but he should be doing it according to the spirit of the, like, all right. And that's where you sometimes lose the will to have the argument because it's so disingenuous with fans and clubs. We're seeing this from Barcelona. Tottenham have issued a complaint about refereeing this season. Manchester United have issued a complaint about refereeing this season. And like you said, those, I haven't seen them, but it's just going to be full of, we should have got this, we should have got that. And it's not going to be full of, oh yeah, we got this when we shouldn't have got that. That's the nature of it. So it's tough. But I agree with the referee. I don't think, and that's a really, really long, meandering answer, but I don't think we should be giving penalties for that.
No, it's not. It's not a really long answer, and I love it. I love your input. I love your story. This is why you're here. This is why you're put on the spot, because you talk so interestingly and you give such valuable insight. So thank you, Chris. And I agree with you to a very large extent. But the biggest issue I'm having, comprehending the referees. Now, let me bring up a new problem. Okay, I know we've already talked about it together. This was after the Newcastle Tottenham game where Newcastle were awarded a penalty. The referee was sent to the monitor. It never looked like a penalty. Months have passed by, and I still agree that should not have been a penalty. I understand that you mentioned that the referee does educate the players, right? This will be a foul. This will not be a foul. So one issue I'm having is maybe what would also improve, and I will touch upon the second thing that will improve. The gap between the fans and the referees, which is ultimately the biggest issue for the referees, I would say. When the referee is sent to the monitor, I understand that, it is clear and evident decisions, but not always. And I think that the referee should have more balls. Maybe they're not allowed to have more balls. Maybe it's, we are speaking about their careers as well, and, they have to put their arrogance to the side and evaluate the situation from a subjective and objective point of view at the same time, which is very difficult. If the referee goes to the monitor and says, no, I don't agree with that decision because there are a lot of times that can happen, especially in the Premier League. Do you think that would improve, the way the fans see the referee?
Well, a couple of comments. First of all, going back to the Bentancur one, I think that would be. Can you imagine how much? I think it would be better accepted if we'd have heard the audio of what happened beforehand, because I don't know because I haven't heard it, but knowing the situation and having been in that sort of situation, I can almost guarantee, without 100% guaranteeing, that the conversation went something along the lines of, if that corner comes in and you block that guy in any way without looking at the ball, I'm going to give a penalty. And then it happens. I think if it had played out like that, fans would have gone, they wouldn't have blamed the ref or the VAR, they'd have blamed Bentancur, because he's literally been told 5 seconds before, you can't not look at the ball. And then to do it immediately afterwards, I think people, and that's another advantage, I think, to opening up the mics and letting people hear. They would realise that actually you can't defend the player on that. I understand whether it was enough for a holding offence, let's park that. I'm just saying this guy had been warned 2 seconds before, but as fans, we don't necessarily hear that. But on to the general sort of point. So remind me, what was the example you just, did you give an example there?
No. It was just about the Bentancur incident, but it was mainly, the question was
about going to the monitor. Yeah.
About going to the monitor, not sticking to the initial decision.
Yeah. So that's to do with the protocol of how it currently works, right? So again, misconceptions. So if they could say to the referee, I think you might give a different verdict if you watched it again, go and have another look, I think you'd see more, they'd go more often, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
You'd see more referees go, no, I'm happy with my decision. But the way it works currently is that's not how it works. So they can only recommend that they go to the monitor if, in the opinion of the VAR, there is clear and obvious evidence that a mistake has been made. So the fact that they're going in your head already, like let's say I'm the VAR, you're the ref, I'm going, Martin, go and have a look at this for me. I'm actually telling you, Martin, you've made a mistake. I'm telling you you've made a mistake, and I'm going to show you the evidence when you get there. So when you go and look at it, you're not reevaluating from a neutral starting position. You're reevaluating from your colleague. I'm there trying to help you, and I'm telling you you're wrong. So it's very difficult in that scenario to go, actually, no, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to stick with it, which is why we see it so infrequently, because it's already there. It's already baked into the system that I'm telling you that you've got it wrong, because that's the way the VAR protocol works. So that's why you see so infrequent overrules. The only thing that I think, again, we've forgotten, I think a valid question then is, what's the point of going over? You might as well just go with the VAR. However, the first season in the Premier League, that is what happened. Referees didn't go to the monitor. People forget this. The first season, referees never went to the monitor. They just listened to the VAR and said penalty. But football wasn't happy with that. Football said, well, this guy's not refereeing the game anymore. He's got to have the final say. So they said, all right, he's got to have the final say, so let's make him go to the monitor and have a look. So now we do that. Now we're not happy with that either. And that's the nature of football. It's kind of like, no matter how it changes, I always use the phrase about fans, but this is true about football as a whole. They have a vested interest in being outraged. They don't have a vested interest in what's fair and correct. They have a vested interest in their club being hard done to. So it doesn't matter whatever we do, they will find a way to criticise it. And that's why it's a refereeing something, it's a job that you can never be the winner in.
Yes. Yeah, which is what we've touched upon exactly in this video, is it's almost impossible. But what you've mentioned is that the being mic'd up, and it's really, I've read comments and it's been very positive, whether that's been done in the Serie A or in the Premier League. It's received a lot of positive, feedback. And that's something that is fantastic, because that's something we need. I myself, when I watched the video, when I watched the audio footage, I really like it. I understand the decision. It was literally Manchester United against Tottenham, and there was no decision that I felt, but this is wrong. No, I liked it. I liked every single decision, and it was because, why? Transparency. And this is the misconception that we have is, like you mentioned, Chris, we didn't get any transparency with the Benton call. What was he maybe the referee telling them before the corner kick was taken? But back to the point of being sent to the monitor. I understand what you're saying, but this is back again to the point we made earlier: is the referee sees it as in a certain way, and what is being criticised is the VAR maybe having too much hands-on the situation. Like you mentioned, World Cup corners will be potentially analysed whether they should be given as a goal kick or not. And this is the referee that is on the field has so much less power, and this is what I personally do not like. Do you agree with me with this?
The problem is it doesn't matter what the system is. We just want the outcomes we want for our team. So to a point, I agree. But then whatever you would advocate for, if you could put in Martin's perfect system, everybody would still criticise the second it didn't work for their team. So, and this corner stuff, I think, I get it, because what's happened is now, let's say we might have fixed the worst offences that happened in the box, but the managers will come out now genuinely, as we've seen, and go, yeah, well, it's all very well, but it wasn't a corner in the first place. Okay, so now we'll check corners. But the way we're checking corners means that one game we might go, before the corner's taken, we might go, actually, it's not a corner, it's a goal kick. Okay, stop the corner, goal kick. But the next game, if they haven't got time to check it, or it's not obvious enough, the corner's going to be taken. They're not going to wait to check it. So how is that fair? 1 week, the one game, the corner's overruled for a goal kick. The next game, it's not. And this is where I think we're in a whole world of bother. But I don't really know the answer, because I do think that no matter where you draw the line, no one's ever going to be happy with where the line is. And they're going to say, well, no, we should have checked the 1 week because you don't get a decision. Well, we should have checked that. The next week, when it goes a different way, you go, well, they shouldn't be checking that. I'm like, okay. But that is football, I think. And I think referees probably get to the point where we kind of accept that it doesn't really matter, which you're going to get criticised either way. So that's why you have to be careful as a referee who you listen to. If you genuinely take... and at times on podcasts, maybe I look a bit dismissive of some fan criticism because of that reason. I'm like, you're just so biased that your opinion, I can't take it seriously. And that's just the way it is, mate. Fans are fans, managers are managers. They've all got jobs to do to engineer the outcome for their whatever they need. And that does not align with a referee and subjective decision making. It just doesn't.
I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. I think you summed it up perfectly. No matter what year we'll be speaking, whether that's 10 years down the line, whether that's 20, whether that's 20 years earlier on, the referees will still have some disadvantage, and they will never be the winners. This is exactly how you put it, and I agree with you. And I think, unfortunately, if you do want to become a referee, you will never be the winner. You'll have so many perks with it. But ultimately, in the eyes of fans, no matter how much VAR will progress in the favour of fans, you will never, ever be the winner. Fantastically put there, Chris. But now, from VAR, let's step away from VAR. And I want to mention one last thing so that we sort of link Spurs into it. Now, Mark Clattenburg mentioned on a recent podcast that during the Sir Alex Ferguson era, a lot of players would come in and say that wasn't a foul, and he would put subconsciously pressure, not on that decision, because the referee obviously won't change it, but on the further decisions. And we see this often with Manchester City crowding the referees. It's clearly an instruction. Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United. Why are Tottenham not using this to their advantage?
I think the first thing is to question, is it an advantage? I genuinely don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other, but as a referee, I'm not convinced that it follows the more shit you give me, the more I'm going to give to your team. Maybe not anymore,
but I think it sort of did work like that.
The opposite might be true. Like, the more shit you give me, the more I'm going to think, I'm going to give it the other way. So I don't know that it actually, but I do understand that fans, it is a thing in the psyche of fans and maybe managers and coaches of get onto them and try and get things. And you're right, it's never about that decision. It's always about the next decision. Should teams do it? look, I guess I've got to take my referee hat off there and just say, if I'm a coach or a manager, whatever I can do that I think is going to give me an extra 1% of an outcome, I would be doing. So if I genuinely believed that that would influence the referee and it gives me a better chance of getting the next decision, I would say yes, go and do it. Putting my referee hat back on, I would say the challenge then for refereeing is to not allow that to happen. So I don't think you can blame players and managers for doing anything they can to influence the ref, but we as a refereeing group have to be strong enough to go, however we want to deal with it, we'll say, right, 2 players or 1 player, the captain can come up to us. The second it's another player, just be strong enough to go, it's a yellow card. You're not allowed to do it. There's no argument about it. But referees often, so I will criticise referees, will start on some, not always the refs, but they'll start a new directive to handle things in a certain way. And we see 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of, we saw it with the waving of the yellow card. All of a sudden, everyone was getting caution for waving a fake yellow card. And then it slowly drifts away and people are allowed to do it again. So sometimes I think referees at the top level are not strong enough for the benefit of the whole game. Yes. They're just thinking of what benefits them in this single match, which I get, but referees should be stronger as well. But in terms of crowding refs, I think this would shock people that I know me, that wasn't good English, shock people that know me to see me say that, yeah, I probably would advocate for it if I was a coach or a manager, because I'd do anything I can to get that advantage.
And I don't blame as well the big teams doing it, which is why sometimes I wonder where there is a certain decision that isn't in our favour, and it feels like our players are a little bit weak in this aspect. Maybe that changed under Roberto De Zerbi, but again, it dismantles the whole point of the protection that the referees have if we are sort of promoting this behaviour on the field. But Chris, in the backstage, you mentioned to me your past relationship with Howard Webb, and there was a certain decision that happened against the favour of Tottenham. Run the fans or run the people watching this through it.
Yeah, so I was rubbish ref, but I was fortunate because of my job that I got to meet people. I went training a couple of times with the Premier League refs who left me miles behind because they're so much fitter than I was. But yeah, I got to know Howard reasonably well at the time. Great guy as well. People it used to really upset me back in the time because I used to know these people personally, and I could see they were great people and they really meant a lot to them. So the kind of abuse they get on a personal level, I think, is uncalled for. But yeah, Howard, in interviews since he finished, let's be honest, Howard Webb, what a great referee. I know people say biased United or whatever, but brilliant ref. We haven't got anyone. Michael Oliver's our best referee, but I don't think he's as good as Howard. But Howard's given many interviews since he retired, and one of the common questions, what's the worst decision you ever gave? And he talks about a Man United Tottenham game at Old Trafford. Tottenham were 2-0 up. United going for the title. It's second half, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, I don't remember. And a through ball goes into the area and Aurelio Gomez comes out, slides on the floor with 2 hands. I think it's Michael Carrick, is running through. Carrick's running like this way. Gomez is coming out this way. And the ball goes 90 degrees away. So it's clear, in my opinion, that Gomez has got to have played the ball, because how's the ball gone 90 degrees? But in the moment, for whatever reason, Howard Webb thinks it's a foul, gives a penalty. United score the penalty. Tottenham collapse like we always do, and we lose the game 5-2. Howard Webb always says that that's the worst decision he ever gave. The slightly funny story, I suppose, is that the next day I was with some friends of mine who are referees. We're not mixing in Howard Webb circles. We're like local level refs. But because I knew him a little bit, and I wasn't expecting this, but I was just sat there with my mates. We're talking about yesterday's football, and wasn't that a terrible decision that Howard gave? And my phone goes, and it was a text from Howard Webb. And I don't know why he did this. I still can't even understand why he did it, but it was lovely in a way. He texted me and he was just like, Chris, that penalty yesterday, I'm so sorry that I just genuinely thought that he'd missed the ball. And I'm like, I loved it, and it's enabled me over all these years to have a nice little story. I don't know why he did it, because it was a strange thing, but nice that he did. But he didn't have to do that, because I knew him well enough that, yes, it's my team that he's given a penalty against, but there's not one moment in my head did I think, oh, it's corrupt. Oh, he's favoured Man United. I know what it's like to be in that situation. I've given enough bad penalties myself. I know that in the moment you go, it's a penalty, given a penalty, and then you go, oh,
yeah,
it's not a penalty. But you've got a split second to make it. So, and this is the difference between how I look at football and most fans. I look at it with an empathy and an understanding of they've done their best and sometimes they get it wrong. Whereas fans don't think that they do their best. They think that they're corrupt. They think that they're dishonest in some way. And that's just not the case. But yeah, that's my little Howard Webb story going back to the Man United time. It was a very bad decision.
Yeah.
Google it. Anyone watching this, go on YouTube. Gomez penalty, Old Trafford. That will probably get you to it. It was a shocker.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, that they are human beings, so everyone makes decisions. So that's my last question for you for today is there an element of bias in the Premier League towards certain teams or against certain teams?
I can only say, in all the time that I've refereed, back in the day, I knew a lot of the top guys, including Michael Oliver a little bit, not so much as I knew Howard. I've known hundreds and hundreds of referees lower down the pyramid. I'm yet to come across one person who went out with any other objective than just to do their best and be honest in a game of football. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because we know it has. We know it has. Historically in football, referees have been bribed. But 99.9% of the time, these are guys, you've got to bear in mind that most of them in the Premier League have been refereeing for 15 years. They've been going out week in, week out to referee the dog and duck for hardly any money in the rain, to get shouted at abuse from one man and his dog. And they've gone through years and years and years of that to get to where they're up. They didn't do all of that on the off chance that they might be able to be biased in a game against Tottenham or against Arsenal. It's just nonsense. So I don't believe it for 1 second. They're also professionals. It's their job. The pride for the referee is to be the guy who's selected, like Anthony Taylor and Michael Oliver have just been. They want to be the guys that go to the World Cup, that get the FA Cup final. You're not going to do that if you are disingenuous and you're making mistakes every week, because actually when you were 6, you were an Everton fan and therefore you don't like Liverpool, and Liverpool are playing Newcastle next week. So this week you're going to give a decision for Newcastle. The mental gymnastics that fans do to try and work out that there's corruption, but it's nuts. I can only say genuinely, hand on heart, I believe they go out to do their best. They do it with integrity. Do they always get it right? Absolutely not. But there is a limit. Go and show me where this group of referees that never make a mistake is, because I don't think they exist. And they might not be quite as good as they were, in my opinion, maybe 6 or 7 years ago when we had Mike Deans and Phil Dowds and Webbs and Clattenburgs, but they're still very good. And the notion, I'll end on this, the notion that the English referees are worse than anywhere else is only put forward by people who can't possibly be watching the leagues elsewhere. The English refs are pretty good. VAR in England, not perfect, but the same issues are everywhere. So we're not the worst league in the world by any stretch of the imagination. No other European country has any more referees going to the World Cup than we do. So it's just all silliness, really, by people who have a vested interest in promoting a narrative that their club is hard done to. I do love the idea that the referees met pre-season and said, lads, let's get together. How can we stop Tottenham? Like, talk me through how that's going to happen. Like, it doesn't. And even if that did happen, the best answer for Tottenham, how are we going to stop Tottenham? Just leave them to it. Like, you don't need to get involved. Like, they are bad enough that they don't need any intervention. If it was how we're going to stop Arsenal, at least it's a conversation. And it's the same. Every fan group is the same. So we're talking about Tottenham because we're Spurs fans. Every single set of fans think the referees are biased against them. So I don't know how that's possible. How can the referees be biased against every single team? But
Exactly. Fantastically put. And what a fantastic and splendid interview, Chris. I really enjoyed not only the insight, but mainly the perspective that you've given on the FA, on the PGMOL, it maybe has influenced my view on it, because I've been very critical in the past. You've seen that. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for your insight. I really, really loved you on this channel, and definitely I'll have you on at some point in the future, most definitely. So thank you, Chris, for coming on.
No, absolute pleasure. Sadly, I love talking about refereeing. I'm a big advocate for it, and anytime anyone you want to chat about it or you want an opinion on a decision, I'm more than happy, mate. More than happy.
Perfect. I'm sure we'll have you on for like a referee part 2 version, because there's so much more that I wanted to cover, but unfortunately we are out of time, and you know, it would be an absolute privilege to have you on again. So thank you, Chris. I really, really appreciate you coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And anyone watching towards the end, thank you. Thank you so much. If you could leave a like and subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing. There will be more Tottenham Hotspur content coming towards the end of the week. So thank you for tuning in, and see you later.